What's going on, everyone that's showing up? Hello and welcome. I am the Progressive Moose, and you are catching me on the Progressive Moose News. Welcome, everyone. Bear with me, just getting invites sent out, guys. Start tapping that screen. Tapping is clapping. And, guys, share the stream out. Let everyone know that we're gathering here on Sunday night. Another week has gone by, and we've made it through with all the different chaos and just nonsense going on, guys. We're still here. We're still moving forward. And that's how we need to look at it. Bear with me, guys. I'm almost done sending out invites. Can't see anything when I'm doing it, unfortunately. But we're getting there. Send out those invite, guys. Let people know we're here. We're all fantastic. All right, there we go. Got all the invites sent out. Hello, guys. How's it going out there? Pasty Native, I see you there. Desiree, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Sunday night, guys. We made it through another week. That is the main goal when we start our week, guys, and we've made it through. I hope everyone's doing good this Sunday night. Just had dinner. That's fantastic. I actually just had a bite to eat myself not long ago. It's fantastic, guys. Hope everyone's doing good out there on this Sunday evening. How was everyone's weekend? Hopefully, everyone's weekend was good. I appreciate all of you guys. If you can, tap that like button, guys. Tap the screen. Get those numbers up. Share the stream out, guys. Let everyone know that we're gathering. Sunday night, and you're here with me, the Progressive Moose, on the Progressive Moose News. Hey, Pasty Native. You know what? We'd probably both like that. Get in touch with her, and we'll have to see what the schedule is for her working and whatnot, and what I'm up to. Sounds great. Love to see you. It's been a while. Hello, Kim on the left. How you doing? Good to see you. Fantastic, Pacey. I can't wait. All right, guys, we got 5 people here. Let's get let's get it shared out to other people. Perry, I see you. Welcome. Let's get the stream shared out, guys. Act like you're gonna poke me in the forehead and keep your finger there. Keep it there. Keep it there. Bam. You got a list of people to send out individual invites to. Go down a list, guys. Let people know we're here. Really appreciate it. We're gathering on the Sunday night, guys. I am doing interview style, back and forth with Art Lightstone this evening. It's going to be a fantastic show. Perry, you're awesome. Love to see you, Perry. Hope you're doing well this Sunday evening. Sonia, hello. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for all the love and getting the numbers up here. Really appreciate it. Just waiting on Art to show up, and we will get started. Let me see. You know what? Maybe I'll send him a guest request right meow. I'm gonna bug him. What do you guys think? See if I can get him here quicker. Just 'cause that's the kind of mood I'm in. Oh, it's not me Art. Okay, well, it's not giving me Art on my list as a guest, but he knows we're here. He's a. I will send him another invite, just a regular invite. I'll kind of bug him that way. I'll send him multiples. All right, guys. Right meow. Love it. Every once in a while, I like to talk a little different. Guys, thanks for coming. If anybody wants to come up, guys, if there's anything that you want to highlight throughout the week in terms of news or things locally within your community and you just want to bolster and get the message out there that it's happening, or, if there's anything you got, please request to come up, share it with everyone, let us know what's going on. It's all about doing this as a community. It's about communicating, letting everyone know what's going on in the different corners of Canada and beyond. So, guys, yeah, again, if you got anything, by all means, come on up, share it with everyone. Help help spread the word on all the different issues. Hey, not a problem. Anytime. Like I said, if anyone ever needs, guys, listen, we are a community, and with all the different things that Canadians are facing across Canada, like it's so hard trying to, take care of ourselves the best that we can when we're literally living in survival mode. And so many of us are facing that. So, if you know somebody that's having a rougher go, or, you can even just make them smile for a little bit, try and do your best to brighten someone's day and help out where you can. Doesn't always mean you can, help with finances or stuff like that, but everybody's got a way they can help. So make sure you keep that in mind. Hello, how you doing? Good to see ya. Canning Canuck. Hope your weekend has been well. Thanks for joining, everyone. I really appreciate it. We are up to 13 people. We're getting there, guys. What do we got? 4.1K likes. You guys are fantastic. Show hasn't even started yet, guys. We're 9 minutes out. Again, if you're just joining, I'm going to be having Art Lightstone join me tonight on the Progressive Moose News, and we're going to break down the current housing crisis that Canada is facing. I'm looking forward to the conversation, guys. It's going to be fantastic. Art is a great creator. He's got some amazing messaging. He dives into the issues. He's not afraid to get dirty in terms of getting the message out there, getting to the nitty gritty, and making sure everything he brings to you is factual. He does a fantastic job, guys, and his editing and his video producing skills are fantastic. So again, guys, it's Art Lightstone over at Green Neighbor. You can find him on TikTok, YouTube, pretty much all the major platforms, guys. Go give him some love. He's going to be showing up, so you'll get a first-hand look and first-hand knowledge on who Art is and how Art is and how he thinks. It's going to be fantastic show, guys. So stick around. We got what do we got? We got 8 minutes now until showtime. So we're getting there. Oh, Art is online, you guys. His little green light is on. He's online and he's on his way here. That's what I'm talking about. Awesome, guys. You are fantastic. Hope you're all doing well out there. Guys, if you can, sit down somewhere, get comfy, relax, get some zen vibes going on around you as we get into this conversation. It's going to be a fantastic one. And it's always great when I talk to Art because it's always just like calm, collective, relaxed, but we still bring you the information. We still bring you what you need to know and possible solutions. So I'm sure it's going to be the same with talking about the housing crisis tonight, guys. Always a fantastic conversation with Art. Does a fantastic job of everything that he does. I'm looking so forward. Art is in the house, everybody. Art is here. Good to see you, Art. How you doing, buddy? We've been counting down the time until you showed up. I was getting ready to send you another invite too. There we go. Everybody, you are fantastic. Look at this. Look at the numbers go. How did I get so blessed to have such a community to be a part of? Really appreciate all the love, everybody. Art, you get your butt up here, man. Send me up a request, or do I have to send it to you, my good friend? Either way, we got to get you up here, get you platformed. Guys, we got 5 minutes till showtime. Keep tapping, tapping that screen, guys. Tapping is clapping. Sharing is caring. Share out the stream, guys. Let everyone know that we're gathering. That's okay. Art, I got you. There, I just sent you an invite.
Um, all right. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Let me see. I'm gonna see if I can turn my camera on. All right.
You should be able
Uh,
to.
there we go. I don't know if I've got to bring the camera higher, or maybe I'm just seeing a little square. So if I line this up to the square,
There
looks
we go.
good. How's that? All right.
How you doing, Art?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Moose?
I am doing fantastic. It is a good Sunday evening.
It is. There we are. My son had a hockey game, and
Yep.
fortunately, it was just timed just right, so it ended an hour ago or so. Um, so yeah.
There you go. Just
And he
quickly,
won.
Art, sorry, not the mama. Thank you so much for becoming a part of the team. I really appreciate it. Sorry, Art, just had to
Yeah,
throw that out there.
and they won. So that's
Hey,
always
hey, there you
they're
go.
playing a very good team. I must say they're playing a very good team. Um, uh, I honestly expected the other team would win, but
You know what? Honestly, I'm going to go with what you're talking about there. I went over, I felt bad because I hadn't gone to see one of my nephew's games yet this season. And he had a game today, so I was there. Started at 1 o'clock. Or sorry, they had to be there at 11. Game started at 11:30. All season, his team could not win a game. And by chance, this game, second last game of the season, they nailed it. They killed it. They whipped butt. They won their first game. They were so proud of themselves, and everybody's proud of them.
first first game of the season that
First
they
game,
won.
yep, first game of the season, their team has won. So they were ecstatic. They were throwing their sticks and dogpiling each other in the middle of the ice after. It was fantastic.
That is awesome. That's quite something when that happens. I've seen those teams, um, and my son is he's been on teams that have struggled, but never quite that situation where they're playing all all season and they're not winning a game. But that does happen. Um, yeah, it depends what centers you're playing against, right?
Yeah,
It depends that
absolutely.
you're from a center that has a triple A team, a double A team, and a single A team, and then you're playing somewhere that just has one team, and so you're playing against players who maybe should be on a triple A team, but they only have that one team. So you know, yeah.
No, absolutely.
Oh my
Absolutely.
goodness.
Guys, we are 2 minutes till showtime, so keep tapping the screen. Tapping is clapping. Share the stream out, guys. We're getting the numbers in, but let more people know we're here. We're having a conversation tonight. Art Lightstone and myself going to be talking about the current housing crisis. It's going to be a fantastic time, so guys, make sure you get the word out. Tell Og, I see you coming in there. You rascally man, you. There you go. Art, fantastic. Before we get going, we got about a minute left, so might as well get going now.
Yeah.
Guys, welcome to the Progressive Moose News. I am the Progressive Moose, as you see me. I have Art Lightstone from Green Neighbor with me tonight. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. It's the, what, I think second time now you've been on the show.
Mm-hmm.
There
But
you
the first
go.
time where I could show my screen,
Ah,
because the last time
yeah,
I didn't have enough subscribers to be able to show a video of myself, so it was just voice.
yeah. Art, break it down. Let people know where they can find you. Let them know what your content's about. Give us all your deets.
Yeah. Well, I kind of started out on YouTube. Um, so I'm on YouTube under Green Neighbor, spelled the Canadian way. uh, and and then I slowly discovered Instagram and TikTok. And when I found TikTok, it was really quite a gratifying experience. I kind of felt like there was a real community on TikTok of progressive thinkers, people who are politically engaged, um, and really trying to raise awareness of these issues. And just really like nice people, like yourself. So many wonderful folks, wonderful characters. The real J Dub, satirical Sarah, Creek Pete, um, and very supportive. But anyway, so in all of those cases, I think Instagram and TikTok. I believe it's always under Green Neighbor, but you can also find me as just Art Lightstone. Um, I I started out just being me, on YouTube and so on. So I just transitioned Art Lightstone, but the kind of the handle is Green Neighbor. And I'm still mixed up about, officially on these different platforms. Am I officially Art Lightstone, but my handle is Green Neighbor, or am I officially Green Neighbor, but my handle is Art Lightstone? But either way, I try not to hide, or not. I don't make hide's not a good word, but just kind of obscure, I guess, who I am. I'm just always, because I'm always upfront about who I am and what my story is. And in general, my story is, well, I'm a retired economics teacher. Um, but when it comes to the housing issue in particular, maybe I'll continue answering your question. So, um, as I was approaching retirement, I was just chomping at the bit to become a full-time activist, and I wasn't quite sure how to do that, and I just found myself kind of leaning into content creation, um, and I've always kind of enjoyed that, since grade six. I remember I was in like film club and stuff. I like making films, and I find it to be a very good medium for explaining technical things. Um, and so you may have noticed that tendency, I tend to make more technical kind of productions. There's
Yeah,
just
what you like, you like breaking things down and getting to
Yeah,
the nitty-gritty of it.
yeah, and I also find, and rightly so, that people are skeptical, and they should be. And so I try not to just say stuff. I think, well, this is what I want to. I want to convey this. I want to get this across. So how can I prove it? And I don't even mean prove it by, hey, look, I referenced this, but prove it in terms of making people think of something. Just as an example, maybe I should mention that, what got me into all of this wasn't necessarily housing, but was climate change. Now, as I would, when I was an economics teacher, I I really started to become interested in activism, and I think it was my students who actually got me interested in it. And then I kind of embraced it and made it part of my program. And so starting in 2014, I embedded a program in all of my courses in law, economics, and even accounting. Um, and it was called the Do Something About It project. And I challenged my students to find a social issue and take action on it, like action, like make a difference, make an impact. um, it was a very complicated kind of project to run, but people kind of loved it. The school loved it, and it really got me involved in activism. And so three issues that I personally became active on, I jokingly say, three files that three files that I'm active on, were climate change, precarious employment, and the housing crisis. We call it the housing crisis now. I think I referred to it as housing affordability back then. And that's it's turned out to be a very handy thing that I'm able to reference. When Pierre Poilievre says, Justin Trudeau caused the housing crisis. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I was active on that file as an activist and as an educator. I looked up, I kind of searched it up on Twitter, because back then I would post a lot on Twitter. We were active on it before Justin Trudeau was even elected. Active on it, challenging provincial and federal governments to impose limits on how much foreign investment could be made in Canadian real estate. Because even back then, my students and I identified that as being the primary issue. That was our belief. And now these days, as I study it more and more, it's very clear that's probably the majority of the problem. But supply is also a problem. But yes, whoever said their housing has been an issue for a long time. But you know what? I have a basis of comparison, and I feel, obviously I'm blessed. I'm very, very fortunate in that I got into the workforce and then got into the real estate market at the last opportunity. I'm kind of like that. It's not a generation. It's literally it's really the year. It's about the year that you got into the market. We bought our house in 1997. And back then, it was quite affordable. You know what? Well, just to be upfront, I'm upfront about who I am, my name, my story. We bought our house for $219,000. And hearing that price now, it sounds like, well, would you buy that? Like, was that in the 1950s? No, it was 1997. And then, everybody has like a 5-year term before they have to renegotiate their mortgage. So in 5 years, we happen to notice that, wow, the interest rates have really come down. And so we didn't think much of it, but other than like, oh, that's good. We'll pay less interest. But I'll tell you, given the price, that reasonable price, which I would set, in comparison to our incomes at the time, it was about 4 times my gross income, or my wife's kind of gross income, or 2 times our household gross income. And that, as well done there. I see 33,000, 1987, nice. That turns out to be kind of a widely accepted multiple of a reasonable housing price. Basically 4 times your gross income. It's actually kind of a frame of reference for a reasonable rate. Now, of course, these days, houses are 10, 12, or even more, times a person's annual income, which is, it's nutso. Is uh, it's basically impossible. So, so the question becomes, well, what has caused this? Now, granted, supply could be better. Supply could definitely be better in Canada. But depending on what numbers you look at, some numbers suggest, I mean, it could be better, but it's not necessarily the issue. It's the ownership of the supply. And it's all the different parties jumping into the pool, trying to get, it's like a game of musical chairs. You've got 7 chairs, you've got 8 people, you start the music, how that game goes. Well, if you all of a sudden throw in 100 people and most of those people don't even want to sit in the chair. They don't even want to sit in it. They just want to have legal title to it so that they can charge you to sit in it. They might not even live in this country. Many of them didn't. That's the only thing, in my opinion, that can explain the dramatic increase in price. I mean, just outrageous. Because if it was confined to just the market forces of the domestic supply and the domestic demand, you just couldn't have prices like that. People can't pay more than they can afford. So it doesn't matter how many people might want a certain chocolate bar, for example. If they can't afford to pay $1 million for a chocolate bar, they're just not going to buy the chocolate bar. Now, housing is really tricky because you absolutely need housing. So it's not like, it's almost unlike anything else, almost.
So, Art,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna quickly stop you there for a second. So, you've been watching the housing market for quite a while, right? Like
yeah,
the
yeah,
housing crisis, everything that's contributed to it.
yeah,
So, for those that don't know, really, and in my opinion, and please tell me if you agree or disagree. But in my opinion, given everything that I've looked into and found for information, this housing crisis really stems back to like mid 1960s going into 1970s, when after the really housing boom after World War II started to calm down, that's when housing went from being more of a uh, government thing and became started to become more privatized, for profit. You saw the shift from the normal family dwellings to more of condo style, all that sort of stuff, right? So, can you kind of take us through that and kind of give us an insight as to how it's kind of gone since then? And really, at the end, like, because me and you both know, and we'll get into a bit later, as to all the different faucets essentially that have led us to where we are in terms of the housing crisis, um, rent prices, that sort of stuff as well gets coupled with that. But can you kind of take us through a couple of the different issues that we've faced? Really, I think a lot of it at this point has been since pandemic, where it really got exacerbated. Um, Especially with banks. Just one more quick point, and I'll hand it back. But especially with banks at the beginning of the pandemic, really started handing out mortgages like candy. Um, and that really didn't help things either in terms of getting the supply really dwindling. And a big issue that I found was a lot of those mortgages, the, around that time of the beginning of the pandemic, they weren't fixed mortgages. They were handing out variable mortgages like candy. And now you're seeing a lot of people having to, for lack of better words, or quote unquote, foreclose and walk away from their homes because now they just can't do it.
yeah. So there are a number of events, kind of in more recent, our recent memory. So if we were to start back where things really started to change, it was in 2002. That's where I identify it. But admittedly, I'm kind of looking at that egocentrically. So I'm middle class, right? That's how I, moderate income kind of a teacher. So I saw things change dramatically for my friends, colleagues, family, people who are also kind of middle class. That really started to become dramatic in 2002. But of course, that would mean lower income households would also really be suffering. But when it comes to the lower income households, that's kind of there's another set of issues that started to change in the 1960s, 70s, but then very dramatically in the 80s when the federal government just got completely out of the game of providing public housing. Um, Kind of downloaded it to the provinces, and then they've been kind of fighting back and forth ever since. But there's, there has been certainly funding for those lower income, shall we say, households that would typically rely on publicly developed housing. Um, there has been the accelerator fund, um, the rapid program. It has there's three letters to that: rapid initiative, rapid housing initiative. Maybe that was it. And that tended to look at programs where you could take kind of existing structures. Maybe they used to be factories, but let's see if we can repurpose them very quickly as accommodations, or fix up kind of dilapidated apartment buildings, so things that's what the rapid housing initiative was all about. uh, these are having some success, but it's just not at the scale. We're talking like 130,000 units kind of thing. But some statistics suggest we need to develop about 5 to 6 million housing units by 2030. So, hey, it's great, to develop very quickly, 1 or 200,000 units. Um, I believe that was in the province of Ontario, but and probably more throughout the country. But yeah, that's kind of small potatoes compared to what the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation suggests. Something like we need around 5.5 million new accommodation units, not necessarily houses, right, but
Mhm.
units of accommodation by 2030, based on demographic trends and so on. So, we're when you look at those numbers, we're quite shy of the mark in terms of supply. But that didn't happen overnight. Like, to your point, started in the 60s, started falling behind, 70s falling behind, and then 80s, they were like, I'm out. Federal government was like, I'm out. and 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 there you go. All of a sudden, there basically public housing was done. Very little new public housing was being built. Um, and so, when you run deficit after deficit in terms of the population's growing, especially the primary growth is in immigration. Um, but you've gotten out of the housing game as a government and just saying, well, let's let the market handle it. Um, that's when we started to get into trouble that you can't get out of quickly. So if you get into trouble slowly over decades, it's pretty darn hard to get out of it quickly. It's
Yeah,
very, very
absolutely.
difficult.
Absolutely. So I'm going to stop you there for a second because you mentioned Ontario.
Mhm.
Um, and that's one area I want to kind of highlight a little bit because I do have a little bit of an understanding on
Yeah.
the whole Ontario situation. So essentially, a lot of stuff when it comes to housing, whether you're talking the infrastructure to put in new builds, or whether you're talking affordable housing,
Hmm.
um, quote unquote, yeah, social housing, affordable housing, however you want to say
Hmm.
that, a lot of that you would think is a provincial responsibility. But at this point, over time, with the Conservatives being the government in Ontario, that sort of stuff has been brought down to the level of municipalities to cover in terms of funding, getting that building done. And I'll just use my local here as an example. I was talking with a municipal councillor quite a while ago, and the town had to try and come up with the money to build a multi-unit, I believe he said it's 50-unit um, social housing. And the town was kind of scraping at the bit trying to figure out how they were going to do it because the province was nowhere to be found in terms of trying to help with funding or rolling out some sort of plan for municipalities to kind of kick things off with. And now, just to wrap up my point and then back to you, but now we've actually seen in this community where our municipality just got a housing accelerator grant from the federal government,
Yeah.
and it's going to be getting $2 million for to be able to put the infrastructure in to be able to start to put more builds in, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and that's just one fuss, and again, that's Ontario. It's not like that across Canada, of course, but that's one way that some politicians have made it harder to really move forward. And for just one more context, and then back to you, sorry, Doug Ford and the Conservatives, so Ontario, under their leadership, we're actually dead last in the new build statistics when it comes to provincially across Canada. Because Doug has been sinking money more into refurbishing and fixing up older builds, the newest ones probably being like mid 1990s when the newest ones were actually built, right? So they're pretty far along in terms of time wise now. Um, yeah, so I mean, Ontario's fumbled the ball quite a bit with a lot of different avenues. Um, yeah, and with our election, sorry, one more point, my mind's squirreling. But with our election, we actually saw certain politicians say that they would take housing back on the provincial level. NDP and Green both said they would. Of course, they didn't win. We still have a Doug Ford majority. But,
Hmm.
um, even seeing politicians that are willing to admit, like, no, like it should be a provincial matter and provincial responsibility. And it's time for us to take that back and fulfill our duty as the provincial government.
Yeah. Um, Even Doug Ford's own assessment. Now, did he did he did he get the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation to write this assessment? But the assessment that suggested the four stories by way of right initiative, um, that basically said any if I understand it correctly, any areas zoned for detached housing should just by way of right should also uh, be allowed to construct four-story buildings. Um, but then he shot that down. Like his own report recommended it as this would be a quick way to build units that could provide, 100 units of accommodation or more in a
Yeah,
small space, a relatively small space.
yeah, and
But
his reasoning essentially was they would be eyesores
ugly.
within the neighborhoods.
Yeah. Um, but here's the thing, when I'm driving in certain areas, I went trail running with a friend today, kind of in North York, down there by kind of Steeles. And was I driving along Shepherd? But whether it's in Newmarket or North York or Vaughan, you see some of these new builds. I'm assuming they're condo units because they look awfully fancy. But I'm telling you, folks, these days they're knocking it out of the park when it comes to design. These places look great. They don't all. We hear that 4 stories. You imagine like some army like or war era box with just windows. But they look great. Some of the really modern designs. Um, I I sheepishly have to admit that years ago, I remember going to a town council meeting, and with a few friends and neighbors, and just kind of expressing my displeasure at having townhouses built in our neighborhood. And I feel I'm really embarrassed about that now. But just in full disclosure, full transparency, just so I can, I'll be able to say, well, I kind of understand the mindset, but I also want to say that, okay, I had that mindset, but I live in the exact same neighborhood that I lived in when I went to our town council meeting and I said, I don't know about this. You know, we have a single detached home, so I'd like all the houses here to be single detached homes. But again, to my point of, and I remember a counselor standing up and saying, "Well, sir, they really do a great job of the designs of these townhomes, and I'd challenge you to even notice the the difference." And he was right. Those houses look great. They're. I've never noticed a thing about like, oh, gee whiz, it's devalued the neighborhood or anything. I think it's great. And now that I've matured more as a person,
You
uh,
know, and just quickly, that's a lot of what I'm seeing within my small community now, especially with the talk of building more purpose-built housing,
mhm.
is the municipality has been green lighting different types of builds in different parts of the town, and the people within those neighborhoods, there's been pushback, and what I get is they don't right out say it, but it's essentially, I'm worried about my property
Yeah,
value
yeah,
because you're going to put that in, it's going to screw me. And, I always, whether it's Facebook, whether it's in person, doesn't matter. I call that out. Like who at this point, like I get it. It's a hard one to kind of grapple back and forth with because the fact is when it comes to owning a home, that is the best chance we have to build equity,
yeah,
right? So I can absolutely understand a bit of frustration, but at the same point, when there's people, when there's a vast amount of people that don't even have like their first plate at the table in terms of a home, I don't really, I don't feel bad for the people that are bitching about the property values because of new builds going up. Because sorry, but there's people, and I apologize for my language, but there's people without a fucking home, and
yeah,
it's because too many people are looking at homes or buying essentially realty, whether it's houses, whether it's apartment buildings, and looking at it as an investment when housing isn't a fucking investment. Housing is a basic human right
oh,
and a
right,
basic human need.
yeah, yeah. And to your point, the countries that do this well, like Belgium and Finland and France, they they look at these things as like a 30-year plan, and it's not just like, oh, we better quickly slap up an apartment or something, because you have to build everything else too, the infrastructure, the schools, hospitals, um, uh, commercial centers, and so on, the amenities and infrastructure to accommodate those people. And that should be done, like over a 30-year plan, not just, oh, reacting to a problem. Let's try to create a band-aid. Um, but along with that, consider, those countries I just described, the they typically, the Scandinavian countries especially, they also do this really well. Um, they have great education systems, really tremendously educated and kind of compassionate populations and healthy populations and robust economies. And what people fail to recognize, and I think you alluded to this earlier, uh, it's not even just about, well, they need a frickin' home, a place to live. But when you take a housing first approach, which is becoming more and more popular throughout the world, and Canada's starting to do that, if somebody's got some problems, for example, addictions or so on, and they're homeless, give them a house first. Make sure they're sheltered first. And then whether we're dealing with literally the homeless, and when I say that's a complicated issue too, but and I don't even mean literally living rough outside, because that's a subcategory of homelessness. Um, it's a smaller category, but it's not a small category. Like, it's not insignificant. It's actually a pretty respectable chunk of the total amount of people who are homeless. I think on any given night in 2024, across Canada, there were about 8,000 people living rough outside. And you might find that that doesn't jive with figures that you've heard, you or other folks who are listening. Um, but that's because a typical number that you'll hear is, okay, across 2024, 231,000 people in Canada experienced homelessness. But that could be technically, it could be for a night. I'm not saying most of the time it wouldn't be, actually. It would be much longer, but it's at some point. So I think the kind of issue that people are curious about, they want to get a sense, well, how many people are homeless and how many people are living rough outside? Well, okay, on any given night, you're looking at about 8,000 people across the country living rough outside, like in
Mm.
tents under bridges, over a grate in a parking garage, something like that.
Yeah.
And in total, so including the people living rough outside, in total, it's about 34,000 people on any given night. So that's
Yeah.
different than, okay, across the year, how many people experienced, in passing. It could be for a night, probably not, probably longer, but it could
Yeah.
be for a month, a couple of months, half a year. But I think, at least in my mind, I want to know, well, on any given night, how many people are we looking at? So, yeah, 34,000, that's a good chunk when you look at like any given night. That's the number of homeless people in Canada. And so that's a very different issue. Like, I think there's kind of two issues here. And one is enabling lower income people who may or may not, I hate to even lump this in, but I have to, because living rough outside is a form of homelessness. It's the worst kind. Um, but in those cases, addictions and mental health are often part of the issue. Often, not always. Um, but then we've got that whole other big chunk, 34,000 people who are homeless. And a lot of those folks are just financially, it can't make it work. They just
Yeah.
can't do it. They just cannot pay the rent that somebody's asking. And so
Yeah.
they end up being part of the hidden homeless. They're couch surfing.
That was going to be where I was going to go. The fact is, it's couch surfing. It's staying one place for a week, staying at another friend's place for a week if they've got an extra room, sort of thing. Um, yeah,
Some
and
sort.
that's a lot. That's a lot of what we see in the small communities, like what I live in. We do have a homeless population. They're just not on the streets. They're, like you said, couch surfing and finding places, from day to day.
And those places that people find, another category of homelessness, in this hidden, there's two broad categories: living rough outside, so you can see
Yep.
those people, and then the hidden homeless. But there's all these subcategories of hidden homeless. They might be living in shelters, transitional housing. It could even be like that. Transitional housing could be a group home. It could be a hotel or a motel. Um, but another very interesting part, and a part that I kind of have some personal experience with, is inadequate housing, like inadequate or substandard housing. Like they've figured out, they've built something, or they're living someplace that's not really meant to be lived in. It wasn't really meant to be lived in. It's some old store or shop or something that they're
Yeah,
living in,
but
and
it's
they're
a
living
roof
above,
over their head. It's the bare minimum.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They go somewhere else to shower. It's not really meant to be lived in. And when I think of, I kind of have an interesting past. I don't mean to be, changing the subject, but this is why I feel kind of passionate about this topic. And I've experienced a lot over my life in terms of housing. And one was living in one of those kind of, people might consider it one of those ugly buildings. It was a two-story apartment, very unusual, because it was like an apartment building, but each apartment had two floors. So you had an upstairs, a downstairs, and you even had a basement.
Yep.
And then there's a door that went out that basement to a hallway, and that hallway went to a coin laundry that was in the building. Um, so those were apartments owned by a company, and that company rents the apartments. Um, and we need more units like that. I kind of feel, in a way, kind of lucky to have had that insight into that kind of housing. It's such a rare form of housing. It was an apartment building, but it kind of felt like you were in a townhome when you were in it, because you had that upstairs, you had the downstairs, you had a basement, you had a sliding door that went out to a yard, like the sliding glass door. And as a little kid, I used to look out that glass door and I'd see the garbage truck come down the street, and I'd be, oh, the Garby men, it's Garby day. I fond memories of living in that house, and it was really close to our school. We just walked across the field and we were at our school. Um, but that form of architecture, that form of housing construction just disappeared. I'll bet most people listening right now are thinking, I've never seen anything like that. We're used to big, tall apartment buildings where you have your just little unit. That's your apartment, one door and a balcony, and that's what an apartment is. But there are these other unique, creative kind of structures that were around, that were built in the 60s, the 50s and the 60s. And then we just kind of stopped doing that and really started segregating housing into something that's kind of, there's the haves and the have-nots, and nothing in between. But nonetheless, moving on with that story, my dad, nonetheless, he thought, well, this is kind of a nice place and all, but if we're going to continue to rent, we'll never get that equity you were talking about. We'll never develop equity in anything. We were pretty poor, so what could he buy? Well, he felt, well, I could afford a trailer. He could buy a trailer. So we bought a trailer for $5,000, and it took my dad 7 years to pay off that trailer. And then we fixed it up real nice, and then we sold it, and we used that money to start building our house in the country. So we start building our house. And now when we started building that house, my mom and I lived in a cabin that my dad had built with his friends years before. No running water, no real heat. We had a potbelly stove. It would definitely be considered inadequate housing. So in that respect, I was homeless for a good, I don't know, a year or two, a year and a half, something around grade 7 and 8. I didn't feel homeless, but I think if someone were to come out and assess the situation, they would probably go, yeah, this qualifies as inadequate substandard housing. I mean, there were mornings I woke up, forgive me if I've already told this story, I may have in a previous live stream, but there were some mornings I'd wake up, I would sleep on a couch. That was my bed. It was a couch. And I'd roll over, and the dog's dish was right beside me. We had a dog, and the dog dish was right beside me, and the water in it was frozen solid. That's how I was sleeping, and I was just like, oh, look at that. The water in the dog dish is frozen. So, I've experienced some things, but fortunately, back in the 80s, the cost of housing was such that when I went to college and university, I could rent a room for like, my first room I rented was $126 a month. So it may, yeah, amazing. And like a really snazzy room in a nicer house was like $220 a month, or $245, something like that. And tuition was like $1,600 a year. Look at how society has just massively changed since I went to university. I'm not, I'm old, I'm getting on in years, but I'm not some like old guy talking about like the 1930s here. It really wasn't that long ago. So I've seen our society slip away to this impossible situation where it's almost impossible to get a university degree now unless you're quite wealthy, or you're going to go into debt that you're definitely going to question whether you could ever pay this off. And you're definitely going to question, well, like, well, if it costs this much money, why don't I just take that money and invest it and do it something else with it? Start a business or become a landlord, which too many people want to do. So bringing that all back to what we were talking about earlier, if housing is affordable, the entire society benefits. And those people who might be thinking, I don't want these ugly houses or these whatever 4-story places, apartments in my neighborhood. What they don't realize is if you deal with not just homelessness, but allow people to just get a foothold in society and start getting equity in an asset, the whole economy is going to benefit massively, massively, right? Because if people are renting, then they can basically never get ahead in life. It's very, very difficult. It's basically
Yeah,
impossible.
yeah. Just to add to that, most people that rent pay more monthly than people that have a mortgage.
Yeah,
That's been the case for decades at this point.
always. Because it's very important for everybody to understand you are always paying a mortgage. Always. The only question is, are you paying your mortgage or are you paying someone else's mortgage? And the only difference is who was able to get the down payment and grab that house first. It's like that
Yep.
game of musical chairs. Like, oh, I got the chair, I got that house. Now you have to pay me to live there. But they don't do it to help people. They don't do it out of the kindness of their hearts. Like, oh, I just want to help people have a place to live. I just like to help people. No, no. They're thinking, well, this is what I've decided to do. In
Yeah,
London,
it's
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, just to add to that, you're absolutely right. It's a way to benefit themselves because essentially they make it easier for themselves, whether it's, in all honesty, covering the mortgage and a couple $100 that they get, after they pay the mortgage of whatever you're renting from them. Um, but I mean, in the end, it goes towards, it's not just financially helping them, it's helping them in so many ways. A lot of people don't realize, like, if somebody has a second mortgage and they're renting out a house, when they pay that mortgage, that's helping their credit, not yours, right? Because as people that rent, we don't like, we pay our rent. It doesn't help our credit. It doesn't do anything for our credit score. But a mortgage, on the other hand, absolutely does, right? So we're losing literally all the benefits of paying a monthly bill,
Hmm.
and the landlord gets all the benefits that we're missing out on.
Yeah. And the more utilities that are in the landlord's name, that it just compounds that problem. If
Yep.
you can have some utilities in your name and you pay them off, that's going to go towards your credit rating. But you're right, you know, that the credit ratings are developed by borrowing money and paying it back, or paying bills, paying utilities. So if the landlord has all of those in their name and says, "Oh, it's, you know, it's inclusive," again, you're paying it. You're paying it anyways. So
Mhm.
that rent is going to cover the mortgage and any of the bills that the landlord has in their name, and the property taxes, everything,
Yep.
and generally a little slush fund on top of that. Uh,
Exactly.
you know, for any miscellaneous repairs or whatever, or just you know, because they're thinking, well, eventually I'm going to get burned. You know, a tenant's going to cause some damage or run out on me or whatever. So I'm going to slowly, you know, take a little extra in and set it aside for that. So yeah, you're always buying a house. Everybody is buying a house. If
Yep.
you're paying rent, you're buying a house. You're just buying it for somebody else.
Yep.
That's
So Art,
that's the real.
I do have a couple questions for you. We are getting to the end of the show.
Yeah, yeah,
So I want to do a quick little thing here, then I'm gonna ask you a couple questions, kind of
yeah.
pick your brain a little bit on things. Guys, I really appreciate all the love so far during the show. You have been fantastic. But what I need you to do is take some of those gifts and send them that way. Send them to that man right there. All right. He's been the one running this show tonight, and I love it because he's so full of information experience to be able to share with us, to give us more knowledge on the housing crisis, what things have changed over time and how it affects things. And just, it's like a tree, right? It's got so many branches and avenues that so many things are connected. And Art is really good at connecting those dots and bringing the information. So thank you so much for that, Art. Um, Couple of questions. We have seen some measures put in place, whether it be by the federal government or in some cases provincial governments. Um, Federally, they blocked foreign investing into real estate. They also put a cap on the Airbnb stuff and kind of tightened regulations that way. Um, Sorry, I'm trying to rattle my brain. Is there other things that throughout your looking into and kind of diving into the housing crisis that you think governments are starting to do better on to help the situation, and kind of your predictions moving forward, given what different levels of government have been doing?
Well, if someone could convince Doug Ford to, you know, accept some of the recommendations of his own, of the report that he commissioned, that would be great. I think the the four floors, some suggestions were 4 units, so attached kind of housing that's 4 units somehow, but also 4 floor apartments by way of right. So again, meaning in a neighborhood that is zoned for detached homes, that should just by way of right, if it's zoned for detached homes, then it should be fine, essentially automatically be zoned for these 4 floor apartments. Um, so I think that would be a very quick way of adding additional units to the housing stock. Um, Admittedly, I would be falling greatly shy of the mark if I didn't touch on, though, the investment issue. So love what the federal government has done in terms of out and out essentially banning foreign investment. Now, there are loopholes. You know, people can find folks who have Canadian citizenship or permanent residency and get them to put homes in their names. So there are some loopholes in that law, um, but this is a controversial issue. But there's also the mom and pop investors, the folks who've just said, well, this is just a great investment, let's buy another house or two or three. Um, those things need to be taxed onerously to make them less attractive, I think. I think we need to wrench those properties out of hands of investors because the numbers are staggering. There's two things to consider with respect to the investment issue. And one is, in terms of the metrics, one is, well, what's the overall number? And the overall number is about 1 in 3. 1 in 3 units of accommodation in Canada are owned by investors. Now that could be mom and pop investors or it could be institutional investors, but it's just a business. And something I just like to remind people is one thing that Adam Smith and Karl Marx agreed on is that landlords are a dead weight on society. And they are. They just are. Like I just want to live somewhere, man. Like everybody needs to live somewhere. And then some landlord gets in there, grabs the place first and says, "Oh, I've got legal title, Well, I tell you what, you can pay me to live
Yeah.
here." Like, well,
Yeah.
why couldn't I just put the down payment on there? Well, I got there first, man. I got there first. So
Yeah.
that it's just nonsense. So I don't, I can't stand that was ever allowed. I think it's just weird. Like we're used to it because we've never known a world without it, a world
Yeah.
without landlords, right? Um, but it's just weird. It's like we would definitely question if somebody bought rights to your kidneys or something
Mhm.
and started selling options and puts and stuff on like your kidneys and my kidneys. That's just weird. Houses are places to live, condos and so on. I get apartments. I'm
Yeah.
fine with the idea of apartments, you see, because the folks who build the property are the people who rent them out. And that's kind of a model that Australia adopted when they were dealing with the same kind of issue. And they've had some great success with that. And they basically said, look, buddy, you can't just come in here from another country
Yeah.
and buy our houses. If you want to come in here and build houses, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
That's going to add to our housing stock. And so I think Canada needs to take a very serious look at enacting taxation laws, and if not, I mean, this would be, radical, I suppose. It was certainly conservatives would look at this as radical, but I'd love to see out and out divestment, like a law that says, hey, you're any citizen or I guess permanent resident can own up to 3 properties. Beyond that, you've got 10 years to divest of that. And between now
Yeah.
and then, we're just going to ramp up the taxes on that property. Um, uh, there's a lot of creative laws that could be passed, and I personally really feel that regulation and legislation should be the first place you go to when dealing with so many of these issues, because it's quick and effective. It's just quick and effective, and
I'm
I think people would be shocked if we even said, "Tell you what, you can own up to 3 houses, but beyond that, you have to start selling those houses." They'd be
absolutely.
shocked at the difference that made.
Now, to your point in terms of policy and legislation. So I don't know if you've come across it yet. I'll admit I'm new to seeing it. I found it yesterday, given our conversation and setting up for
Mhm.
doing the show tonight. So I do want to quickly just give people this information, guys. There's a website out there. It is CanadaHousingCrisis.com. If you go on over there, right at the top, take action for affordable housing for all. Okay, so the main page here, I'm just going to explain it quick. You go down the main page, and right at the bottom, there's actually like a petition or message that you can send to your government officials. It asks you for your postal code so it can find the proper officials within governments that are relevant to you, and it sends that message to them, saying that you yourself want affordable housing for all. Okay, they've got a disclaimer, and they do have a tab for policy changes within what governments can do. Um, so some of the stuff, and I'll just bullet point, there's eliminate artificial scarcity barriers, there's citations, increase minimum down payment for investment properties, increase capital gains tax for investors and speculators, introduce new tax on vacancies and short-term rentals, and the list goes on, right? So there's so many different avenues that the government can take, and credit where credit's due. Some have already taken some of those steps, right? Whether it's on the municipal level, whether it's provincial level, or even federal level, they've done some, right? But it still hasn't been enough. And it still, in a lot of ways, caters to the capitalist system that housing is currently under. So, yeah, there's so many different things that can be done. And we just need to, as the people of Canada, start being louder and demanding that the government actually take action and do their job to make sure that every Canadian has a home, whatever they need to do to make that happen. Wob Canoe, I believe, over in Manitoba, is really putting the boot down in terms of he wants to solve the homeless crisis in his province, and they're determined to do it. So,
Yeah, Wob Canoe would, and Wob Canoe for a PM, man. Like someday, I hope we see that. I think he'd make a fantastic prime minister. Um,
absolutely.
I I really want to reiterate, like when you said, I want affordable housing for all, and even though I've got my house,
Mhm.
and maybe I could be in a position to go play the game too, and buy an investment property. Never have, don't I wouldn't consider it. Investors invest, buy stock, buy gold, buy freaking art or something. Don't go buy people's houses. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Buy
Um,
investments that are
but
meant for investing.
yeah, buy
Yeah.
investment vehicles, not houses. But what people have to understand is when you support lower income households and moderate income households, that improves dramatically the entire economy because these are the folks who have the higher what's called marginal propensity to consume. In
Yeah.
other words, they spend their money. They spend their money. Whatever money they earn, they spend it. And that is what creates jobs, manufacturing, retail, services. Now, when the money gets concentrated in the upper 1%, they're already spending all the money they need to spend. They're not going to spend a dime more. Even if they make another million, another billion, another 100 billion, they're not going to spend a dime more. They're just going to invest more, which buys those houses. Right? They're just going to buy more houses. And the
Yeah.
problem is, if we don't fix this investment issue, like I say, it's basically 1 in 3 units of accommodation across the country owned by an investor. If we don't fix that, then the problem is, unless we're looking at out and out units of social housing, public housing, then if we build more houses, the investors are just going to buy it. So remember,
Absolutely.
I was giving that number like 1 in 3 houses. But
Yeah.
if you look, it's kind of like the electric vehicle kind of thing. There's, well, what percentage of all cars on the road are electric vehicles? And
Yeah.
then what percentage of new vehicles that were just bought this year, what percentage of those were electric vehicles? So it's very similar when it comes to units of housing. So
Yeah.
when you look at, hey, of the units of housing that were built last year and the year before and the year before, and it's typically on a good year, it's about 250,000 units of accommodations built across Canada. That's a good
Yep.
year. Um, Sometimes you're looking at 40, 50% or more of those units of accommodations snapped up by investors. So
Absolutely.
so that trend is just increasing dramatically, and as it increases, it just increases more because people become forced to be poor by way of just the exorbitant rents that they have to pay. They have no money
Yep.
left to buy anything else, so the economy suffers. People are just spending everything to make investors richer.
Yep. With
That's the
that,
problem.
Art, no, absolutely. I 1,000% agree with you on that. We are going to make that the last point of the night because we are at 9 o'clock. So I really appreciate it. And before I want to give you the platform again quickly at the end here, just to let people know where they can find you and everything. But guys, before he does that, again, I really appreciate all the love. One more time, guys, shoot some gifts that way. Show Art some love and give him some love. I really appreciate his words. I appreciate his insight. I think we can all say that. So while they're doing that, Art, again, give us your platform. Where can people find you, and what are you doing these days?
Yeah. If I can get my voice back. Green Neighbor, Art Lightstone, TikTok, Instagram, and on YouTube. And primarily, I'm really focused on the housing issue right now because, excuse me, sorry, because I've just determined, even though I'm primarily a climate activist, people aren't going to care about the climate until they have a place to live. And so I had to shift gears. Like they're not going to vote for a party or care about the issue or even believe in it until it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Until
Yeah,
they right. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So that's why I'm focused on housing.
absolutely. And Art, you do a fantastic job. Again, like I'm so appreciative that you're around and do what you do. And I know there's so many others that feel the same because you really do highlight key information and you do it in a fun way a lot of times, which is also great to see, especially in times that it might be a little harsh and it might be a little hard to get through, but it's always good to get a smile and a little bit of humor in those dark times. And you do fantastic at doing that. So thank you so much. Um, that being said, guys, don't forget if you haven't followed Art yet, hop on over to his page, give him a follow, give him some love over there, whether it be on his TikTok, YouTube. Just make sure you show him some love that way as well. Let's bolster him, let's bolster his voice and what he does, and get the message out there. So again, Art, I
Thank you.
really
Thank
appreciate you
you.
coming on. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
no, thank
Uh,
you.
you've been doing great, Art. Keep up the great work. Yeah, and I guess
You
that'll be
too.
it for tonight.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks for the love. And
Thank you.
I really do believe if we all work together, we can we can force the government to do what needs to be done. And if we can't, then we can do it ourselves. I really do believe there's a path forward for that. We just have to
Absolutely.
organize. We have collective action. It's
Absolutely.
not just for unions. Renters can do it too, and they have, and it's been
Yeah.
very successful.
Yeah, just quickly, guys, there's actually renters that have been doing it in Toronto. They've made the news quite a bit. Um, but there is ways that renters can collectively make a difference for sure. And 1,000%, we need to organize, and that's what the community is about right now. That's what the Moose. That's what I stand for. That's what Beaver Politics stands for. That's what a lot of us creators are standing for right now. Is we're trying to collect. We're trying to do it as a collective and finally see the change we need to see for the people, by the people, of the people.
Yeah,
So
and it's the people who have
fantastic.
power. this notion that we don't have the power, that's an illusion. That's an illusion. When those renters create associations, they learn very quickly, like, oh, the owners of this building, they're not so rich that they can just let it sit empty. They need our money. We're the ones paying the mortgage, right? They're always the
Abs
one.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you again, Art, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for all the love. Really appreciate it. And yeah, until next week, guys, stay safe, stay sane, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and we'll see you at the end of next week.